You've been a bit vocal on social media and in your blog about some of the content of some other questions on the paper. We saw obviously in July that the decision was taken not to extend question time in Tynwald. The Chief Minister then said that he felt the tone and the content of some of the questions was perhaps a bit trivial or a bit flippant. Is that a view you share?
I share in part, but I don't believe Tynwald should, cut short a question paper. I think I think everybody has a right to ask those questions. So going back to the July situation, I think we should have carried on. We had 3 days set aside, so we should have gone through the question paper. If we take this month's paper, 132 questions. I went through them the last couple of nights, and to be fair, I could pretty much write off at least half of those, and I think most of those could have been answered by email. I think we're in a very unique and privileged position as Tynwald members, so we should ask questions that have relevance to them, that they are asking a proper question in respect of trying to find something out, trying to raise the profile of something. There's what we shouldn't be doing is just asking questions for the sake of asking questions. And as much as I may get myself in trouble with some of my colleagues, I think some of my colleagues do need to look at what the quality of those questions they're asking, just to be seen as busy, and actually getting actually proper questions on the older papers, which all members endorse and want to listen to, and they want to find out a bit more. That will actually stop, what happened in July, where the Chief Minister and the Council of Ministers and everybody else pretty much said enough of those silly questions had been asked, and we're going to stop the question paper short. So we all have a duty to make sure we're asking quality questions that are in the public interest in order to raise the profile or to raise concerns in the public domain. They shouldn't be there to ask silly questions which could be asked by a simple email.
Several of the questions that weren't asked in the end in July weren't silly questions at all. So the ones that lose out are often serious issues, which are effectively, in this case anyway, prevented from happening by what you have termed silly questions clogging up the system effectively.
I think you're right with the clogging up the system. What we've got to do, and I can't sit here and tell one of my colleagues or two of my colleagues or three of my colleagues that they should be writing better questions. It's down to us individually as Tynwald members to be making sure that the questions we're asking is of sufficient quality and it's in the public interest. I don't think half of those questions are in the public interest, and that is disappointing, and I think maybe it's a reflection on all of us, because it does reflect badly on all of us, and I've seen those comments on social media. And as a Tynwald member myself, I'm very embarrassed that I'm being attached to that, because I felt that the 4 questions I have asked in this sitting are genuine questions, that I'm trying to raise the profile and ask genuine questions, because we've not got the answers from previous questions that I've tabled.
If they're questions for oral answer, I suppose the argument could be made that it gives you a window then to ask supplementary questions. We mentioned at the very beginning of this chat that these are all for written answer, so you can't even use that as a reason.
Yeah, normally if you're in the House of Keys or in Tynwald, your opening question is normally just the starting point. You're keeping back the supplementary questions because you want to put a particular minister or a department under pressure. But again, the opening question would be of sufficient importance that the minister knows where you're coming from, that he knows exactly what you're looking at, so they should be prepared for that. What we're getting at the moment is just some questions that really should not have been tabled. I don't know if that's a concern that maybe the Speaker or the President needs to pick up at some point and just advise members that yes, it is a privilege, and that's very important. Is we have a privilege as elected members to ask those questions on behalf of our constituents and for the wider public, and we should never abuse that.
Is there a risk that question time is being devalued through this, or maybe not even a risk? Do you think it has happened?
Well, I think it goes back. There's always been questions on the order papers that people will always not agree with. But a lot of the time, those questions are very valid. The minister or the department just don't want to answer them. I think this is the first time I've actually looked through a question paper and I've seriously questioned the quality of those questions being asked. Because even if you go back to the last administration, if you take, for example, like Sir Peter Carron or others, Kate Beecroft or whatever, they will table questions. Now, the minister may not like those questions and may request that the question time is not extended, but the quality of those questions is still there. This is the slight difference. What we're getting now is questions that I don't feel are very of good quality enough for anyone to answer really. And we've got to remember, if we go back to the last administration, I think Eddie Tier, the Treasury Minister at the time, answered a written question, and said the cost for each question is around £70, and that's the time of officers collating that information. I may be slightly wrong with that figure, but I've got that in the back of my head, that it was around £70 to £75 per question. So you can times that by the number of questions and saying, does that actually give value to the taxpayer of the island?